The Pharaoh saw a dream where a fire came from the direction of Jerusalem, and it burnt all the Coptic people and their dwellings. But it did not harm the Israelites. When he woke up, he gathered all the priests, soothsayers, and sorcerers, and asked them the interpretation of this dream. They said, "A boy from these people will be born, at whose hands will be the destruction of the Egyptian people." True to character, Pharaoh reacts arrogantly and gives the order that all male children born to Bani Israel be slain. Allah says, "And we inspire to the mother of Musa, suckle him, but when you fear for him, cast him into the river, and do not fear and do not grieve. Indeed, we will return him to you and will make him one of the messengers." By Allah's command, the currents navigated the baby to safety and lodged the basket and its precious content by the riverbank. Again, Allah's plan was in motion, and the basket was dispatched to the most unlikely place by the palace of the Pharaoh. Asya, the wife of Pharaoh, clutched him to her chest and said to Pharaoh, "A comfort to my eye and yours." Pharaoh replied, "He may be a comfort for you, but as for me, no." She said, "He may be of benefit to us, or we might take him as a son. When he grows up, he will help and protect us. Please spare this baby. He's a gift on our doorstep." She eventually convinced the Pharaoh, and thus Musa alayhi salam was raised in the palace as a prince of Egypt. Musa stayed in the palace of the Pharaoh until he reached his full age and was firmly established, which according to many scholars meant that he stayed there until he was approximately 40 years old. The traditions of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ describe Musa as a tall, well-built, dark-skinned man with curly hair. Both his character and physique are described as strong. We will discover in the story of Musa that he was a forthright man. He believed in speaking his mind and standing up for the weaker members of society. Whenever he witnessed oppression or cruelty, he found it impossible to stop himself from intervening. Musa entered the city midday. He found two men fighting, one from his tribe, meaning from the Israelites, and the other from his enemy, meaning the Coptic people. The one who was from his tribe sought help from him against his enemy. Musa had free access and power in Egypt due to his relation to Pharaoh, wherein he was adopted and raised by him. On the other hand, the Israelites also felt proud because he had in fact grown up with them. Musa stepped into the fight and struck the Copt one ferocious blow. He immediately fell to the ground and died. Musa was overcome with grief. He was aware of his own strength, but did not imagine that he had the power to slay someone with one blow. Musa did not intend this. Rather, he only wanted to scare him. Despite that, Musa said, "This is the work of Shaitan. Verily, he is a clear and misleading enemy." He said, "O my Lord, I have wronged myself, so forgive me." So Allah forgave him. Verily, he is all forgiving, the all merciful. In the meantime, the Copts had filed a complaint to the palace, and a manhunt had begun. The Pharaoh called for witnesses. However, nobody came forward, either because the streets were relatively deserted or because the people had no wish to be involved in a serious assault. The authorities had no idea that Musa was involved in the melee. Musa feared exposure for his crime and was walking in the city when suddenly he saw that the man who sought his help the previous day was in a fight with another Coptic man. He suspected that the man was a troublemaker and approached him to warn him about such behavior. The Israelite saw Musa striding towards him and became afraid. He called out, "Would you slay me as you slayed the wretch yesterday? You only want to be a tyrant in the land and do not want to be of the amenders." The man's opponent, an Egyptian Copt, heard this remark and rushed away to report Musa to the authorities. This stinging statement made Musa stop in his tracks. It was evident that the news of his alleged crime had spread throughout town. According to the Quran, and a man came from the farthest end of the city, running. He said, "O Musa, indeed the eminent ones are conferring over you, intending to slay you. So leave the city. Indeed, I am to you of the sincere advisors." So he escaped from there, looking about in a state of fear. He said, "My Lord, save me from the people who are polytheists and wrongdoers." This messenger provided the dreaded confirmation that the news had reached Pharaoh, and an army of Pharaoh's police had already been deployed to capture Musa. With Pharaoh's net closing in around him, Musa's only option was to leave the city. He didn't know exactly where to head, for he had never stepped outside of Egypt before. Nevertheless, he went towards Madian and said that, "I hope that my Lord will lead me to the right path." Musa immediately left the confines of the city. He did not take the time to return to his home to change his clothes or prepare provisions. Musa strode into the desert towards Madian, the country that lay between Syria and Egypt. His heart was filled with fear, and he was afraid that he would turn around and see the authorities pursuing him. He walked and walked, and when his feet and legs felt like lead, he continued walking. His shoes wore away on the rough desert ground, and the hot sand burned the soles of his feet. Musa was exhausted, hungry, thirsty, but he forced himself to continue, some say for more than a week, until he came to a watering hole. Musa threw himself under the shade of a tree. Death in the dry, dusty heat of the Egyptian desert should have been the likely outcome of Musa's journey. Tracking across the inhospitable landscape with no provisions and inappropriate clothing would have been an expedition doomed to failure. Ibn Abbas reported that Musa went from Egypt to Madian eating only plants and leaves. He was barefooted and his stomach was stuck to his back as a result of his hunger, a direct contrast to the palace luxuries. Yet once again, the story of Musa reveals a fundamental truth. If a believer submits fully to the will of Allah, Allah will provide for him from sources unimaginable. Allah will replace weakness with strength and will replace failure with victory. Musa arrived safely at the desert oasis. The smell of water and the shade of the trees must have seemed like paradise on earth. However, Musa was not alone in his newfound paradise. The water hole was surrounded by shepherds watering their flocks. They were pushing, fighting, joking, and laughing, behaving in a rough and tumble manner. Musa flung himself into the ground, grateful for the shade of a tree. As he caught his breath, he noticed two women and their flock of sheep. They were standing well back, hesitant to approach the water hole. Musa was a man of honor. Even though he was exhausted and dehydrated, Musa could not bear to see the women standing back, afraid to move toward the water hole. He approached them and asked why the men in their family did not look after the sheep. The two young women explained that they were sisters, and to protect their chastity and personal security, could only draw water from the well once the men had dispersed. Their father was elderly and unable to perform the task himself. According to reports, once the men were done, they would cover the mouth well with a big rock to protect it, leaving the women the only option of using the leftover water from the previous flock. According to Umar radiallahu anh, the rock was so heavy that it required the strength of 10 men to carry it. However, Musa had been bestowed with exceeding strength. Then, tired and hungry, he went into the shade and said, "My Lord, I am in need of any good that you may send to me." When the sisters came home from their daily tasks earlier than usual, their father was surprised. They related the incident to him, upon which he asked one of them to fetch Musa and bring him home. According to the Quran, one of the two returned to Musa, approached him with shyness, and explained that her father had invited Musa to reward him for his kind act. Musa complied and explained his circumstances to their father. Some scholars state that the father was Shu'aib alayhi salam. The old man quickly had a meal prepared. However, despite his enormous hunger, Musa was apprehensive about eating. The man asked him why. Musa replied, "I was taught not to trade even the smallest reward of the afterlife for even the biggest award here. I helped you only for the sake of Allah, not for this food." The man was delighted with the answer. He said, "We offer you dinner, not in return for helping us, but for being a guest at our home. So come on, do not let it get cold." The elderly man alleviated his fears and told Musa that he had safely crossed the Egyptian border. He was now in Madian and was safe from any authorities that may have been pursuing him. Musa had his meal. Exhausted, he retreated for some rest. After Musa had been invited to stay with the family, one of the women approached her father privately and advised him to hire Musa. When her father asked why, she answered, "Because he is strong and trustworthy." Two qualities that Islam tells us are signs of leadership. When she said that, the father asked, "How do you know that he's strong and trustworthy?" She said, "He lifted a stone that cannot be lifted except by 10 people. And when I brought him home, I walked in front of him, but he said, 'Stay behind me. And when you need to change tracks, just throw a stone in that direction, and I will know.'" The old man loved the way in which Musa conducted himself. He wanted him to stay a lot longer. After some thinking, he came up with a way. He offered Musa the hand of his daughter in marriage. The old man said, "I wish to wed you, one of my 2 daughters, on the condition that you serve me for 8 years. But it'll be a favor from you if you complete it to 10, and I do not wish to put you in difficulty. If Allah wills, you will find that I am an honest man." Musa said, "That is a deal between me and you. I am free to complete whichever of the 2 terms, and Allah is witness to what we say." Imam Bukhari reported that Sa'id ibn Jubair said, "A Jew from Hira asked me, 'Which of the terms did Musa complete?' I said, 'I do not know.' I then went to Ibn Abbas and asked him about it. He said he completed the longer and the better of the 2, since if a messenger of Allah says something, he does it. All prophets and messengers have to spend some portion of their lives as shepherds, to isolate and sever themselves from the distractions of the worldly life. Tending a flock requires a type of patience and vigilance that can only be learnt on the job rather than through observation. This patience and self-awareness is key for them to focus on their relationship with Allah as a preparation for the difficult task ahead. This time is also known as the Waqfat Tarbiyah, the time and place for Allah to teach them of His oneness and to train their manner and character. Musa was no different. And further, his time in the desert eradicated the influence that the corrupt lifestyle at the palace might have had on him. This stage of his life was the final preparation for his great destiny as one of the mightiest prophets and messengers of Allah. In the final year, as a reward for his hard work, his father-in-law offered that for the next breeding season, all lambs born with a particular rare color would belong to Musa. According to some reports, by the will of Allah, usually only a handful of sheep would give birth to spotted lambs, which were sought after and fetched a higher price. But on the final year, all the lambs gave birth to twins, and every single one of them were spotted. Therefore, from owning virtually nothing, he amassed a modest amount of wealth. The old man remarked, "This is Allah's gift to the family of Musa." Musa used to carry a staff to protect his sheep from predators. The staff had a handle on one end, while the other end was pointed and sharp. There are a number of reports about where the staff had come from. One suggests that it originally belonged to Adam alayhi salam and had been passed on to Shu'aib alayhi salam, who gave it to Musa to help him graze the sheep. They were in an area with grasslands to the right and mountains to the left. Wild animals could have struck from anywhere, especially from the mountainside. For that reason, Musa always carried the staff around. Through it, he witnessed many actions of Allah. It was as if there were signs of the greater miracles to appear through the staff. After Musa had completed his term of service that he had pledged to his father-in-law, he was overcome by homesickness. He began to miss his family in the land of Egypt. Even though he was afraid of what would happen if he returned, he experienced a strange longing to return to the land of his birth. Musa gathered his family together and made the long journey back to Egypt. We have to remember that he was still, as far as Egypt was concerned, a fugitive. It was at this time that events took a strange turn. To reach Egypt, they had to cross the Sinai desert. On one particular cold and dark night, they seemed to have lost their way. As Musa walked in the darkness, he saw a light in the distance. On the side of Mount Tur, he directed his family, "Stay here. I see a fire. I hope I may bring you, from that you may warm yourselves." He approached the light and found something wondrous. There was a green tree, but it was glowing and burning with an unusual fire and light. Unknown to Musa, it was about to participate in one of history's most amazing conversations. He walked towards the fire. As he did, he heard an amazing voice.